Welcome, LilyPod listeners and LilyTube viewers, to another episode of LilyPod and LilyTube. And today we're going to get into a really important subject for mid-singles as you contemplate making relationships, moving forward into marriages at midlife, a subject that scares a lot of people, and that is blending families. And we're fortunate enough to have a special guest who is an expert in this field. And we really look forward to learning from her and having this conversation. And we hope it'll benefit you too. Cathy, you want to introduce Brittney?
Yeah, welcome Brittney Phillips. She is a wife, adoptive mom, biological mom, and a bonus mom of a yours, mine, and ours family structure. She is a licensed educator, certified life coach, and a certified step parent coach, helping women strengthen their sanity, spirituality, and their step family is one of her passions. Thank you so much for being here, Brittney. We're excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome.
Maybe you could start by telling us a little bit of your own story and why this topic matters to you.
I'd be happy to. So several years ago, my husband and I were both single parents. We both had kiddos from previous relationships. And as we met, we fell in love really quick. It happened really, really fast. And it just seemed to be going so smoothly. Kids were getting along at the time. Like, we were all getting along with each other. We thought, oh, this is just going to be so smooth. It's going to be flawless. Like, we all have the same value.
Roughly what were the ages of the kids at this point?
Oh, yeah. So his son was almost 6. He was like within a month of being 6. And then my daughter was 3 at the time.
Okay, so you had some young ones. Yeah.
Yep, they were pretty little. And so we thought that would be to our benefit, right? That they're little and this will work out really well.
Well, and in the end, it might be.
Yes. But the thing that was shocking was as soon as we got married, immediately things got hard. The kids started like having like this power struggle, butting heads. We realized that our parenting styles were very, very different. All of a sudden, trying to like work things out with ex-partners got complicated. Co-parenting, it got super heavy in so many different ways, and I was not anticipated at all. Like, nobody could have prepared me for that.
It's actually family, isn't it?
What was that?
It's insta family. Like, you don't get married and have this big honeymoon period and then babies come along. Like, it's just insta family.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, okay, now we're all a family. We're all going to be in the same house, and was really hard for that reason. Kids, we had to shuffle bedrooms, and all of a sudden I'm bringing all of my things and trying to like stuff it into this space and make it feel like it was natural. And it wasn't. It was really tricky. So it actually started to affect my health physically after just a couple of months of this. And I ended up in the hospital for a week, just with help.
The stress?
Well, I think the stress was definitely contributing to it. It was like there were some complications that I had in the surgery, which was definitely part of that. But I think why I ended up having to get surgery in the first place was partly due to the stress of it. So
remind me, were you previously divorced or widowed?
Yes, I was divorced.
Okay. And what about your husband?
My former husband?
Current husband.
Oh, yes, he is also divorced.
Okay, so you both came from divorces.
Yes.
Into this insta family. And then you started having health problems. Now, I started having health problems when we got married.
Like within a week or two.
And I ended up in the hospital going diagnostic testing. And the thing that, or the conclusion that I came to is that I finally could, you know how like when you're going, and then all of a sudden you have a holiday and you get sick because your body can. It's yes. Like, it's kind of like that. And it's because I finally felt safe enough to just not be like the super single mom.
Yeah.
And maybe even start recovering from all the trauma I'd had, like with the divorce.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you felt any of that.
I'm sure that was contributing because really I had only been divorced just over a year at this point, but by the time I got remarried. So it was not a super long period, which I probably would not recommend, but I'm not going to say that God's timing was wrong.
Yeah. But you were still processing all of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And see, and I had lots of years and I thought I'd processed everything, but I think sometimes once you move into a new marriage and you're trying to make this new family work, it kind of like things come up in different new layers. Like, so whether it's new and fresh, like where you were just like still processing, or you're just processing new layers, I think it's like kind of similar either way.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like I was doing all sorts of work on myself, but when you get put in that situation of marriage again, it's going to bring up all sorts of triggers and things that you didn't even know existed until you're back in that situation.
Like I'd almost be surprised if it didn't.
Right.
And people, I think, come into it and don't know that that's going to happen and then freak out and wonder if they made the wrong choice.
Yes.
Well, we didn't either. I mean, I think we both thought that we had worked through our trauma, that things were good that way. And I think that we felt like we were over the trauma because we didn't have our former spouses around to trigger us anymore.
Yeah.
Get a new spouse and they're going to trigger you sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Like you'll have a situation that comes up that even like barely similar to something that happened previously, and immediately like your brain goes there. And so it's like a process you've got to work yourself through. This is the same situation. You gotta like tell your brain to calm down.
Yeah, no one is going to be the same situation. Like it's a whole new set of challenges, right?
Yeah.
Now, Brittney, I think we had you in the hospital, and is that where we left it?
Well, yeah, let's not leave you there too long, but tell us where you were.
So I was in the hospital for about a week, and at that point I'm like, something has got to change. Like this is obviously like paying a toll on my health. So we started trying like all the different things to help our family. Like I am stressed beyond measure. I was depressed. It was like definitely the lowest point I had ever been in my life.
Yeah.
Even going through divorce. This
physically
was like
and emotionally.
Yes. Yeah. Like I was like, I thought this was going to be great, and now it's super hard. And like, why, what is happening?
Are you worrying at this point that there might be another divorce?
Yes, absolutely. I was like, what?
You went through it once, and
I should have just done this on my own. Like all the doubts started coming in. And even though I felt really good about my decision to get married, like that was a leap of faith to even get remarried, doubt just flooded over me at this point.
Yeah.
So I started like trying to find resources to help us, like looking for professional help. So I started going to a therapist, started reading books, talking to family and friends, but it just seemed like nobody could quite understand what I was going through. Like I didn't know anybody that was a stepmom. Like I could not find anyone who could relate to my situation. And it was really, really heavy. I felt completely isolated. So basically what I ended up doing was just turning to God and like, please, like, you've got to help me. I don't know how to do this. I've never been a stepmom. I've never been in a blended family. And obviously my last marriage didn't work out so good. I don't want that to happen again. I really value families. And I know that that's part of God's plan for us. I knew that was right. Like it was like a righteous desire and thing to move forward with, but this was so hard. So I ended up just trying lots of things on my own, lots of trial and error, like literally years of just trying things out and seeing how it worked. And that was hard too. I made so many mistakes. I think I made all the mistakes, and
we did too.
Yeah, like you're not making the same mistakes as last time. You're making all new ones.
new mistakes. Like, and I really thought they were like the right thing to do. I thought I have really good intentions here and I'm doing my best. And then it would like blow up in my face. Like, oh, why is this happening? And so after learning from all my mistakes, I eventually learned the strategies and tools that help blended families, because blended families are not the same as nuclear families. And so
Not
Okay.
at first anyway.
So you almost felt like you were trying to apply what you knew from before and it
Yeah.
wasn't working in your new situation.
yeah, I
Okay.
was trying to like jump in and be a mom to my stepson, but he already had a mom. He didn't want me to be his mom.
So let me throw something out there, Brittney. From our experience, and I'll have you react to this,
Mhm,
because we experienced the same sort of thing. Now, my kids were grown when we got married. Her kids were still pretty young.
mhm.
There was a 6-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I knew those kids for 2 years before we got married.
Mm,
So I wasn't a new person to them, but I hadn't lived with them before.
right.
And the youngest, especially, is kind of a mama's boy, and he thought that I was taking his mom away,
Yeah.
and he thought that, well, there were certain tasks because she was sick that I picked up, like putting them to bed. And he kind of resented, he didn't understand, and he kind of resented, well, how come you're putting me to bed now? That's what my mom does,
Yeah.
I literally didn't have it in me. I could barely walk or like shower or like I was so like, and it wasn't just depression. I mean, it was emotional, but it was like it was digestive and like and the
Yeah.
brain and gut like are closely connected and it was just so difficult to function.
So
Mhm.
it was me putting him to bed or just sending him to bed.
Right.
And he didn't quite get that. And
And I was just so grateful that someone else
Someone helping.
would be doing something that I couldn't do.
and then the other thing I think was, on the parental discipline side, we had kind of we both had family science degrees in college, and the conventional wisdom, at least when I was going through that program, was for a step family, it's best if you let the natural parents do most of the hard work, the discipline and all of that, and ease into the parental role pretty slowly and carefully. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. The hardest part of it was just what I said, when she wasn't up to dealing with things and I sort of had to.
Right.
That, for the youngest, that
Well,
was
and
kind of difficult.
I was
but
in a second marriage for a short time, kind of like really quick after the end of my first 14-year marriage. And
Huh.
I became a stepmom to a teenage girl and such a sweet little person, and well, and now she's just this beautiful woman and having her babies of her own. And I'm so grateful that she was part of my life for that period of time. And I know that that was part of my path. And, but like the situation she was in didn't allow either of her parents to be present. And I had to step in and do all the things mom does, but she didn't want me as a mom either.
Right.
And it was super frustrating. So I guess what I want to come back to is you said you learned that you had to do things different. And we've found through either trial and error with Jeff's case. Well, I guess in both of our cases, it was like just a challenging circumstance in that the other parent or parents weren't available the same way they would normally be. And we were thrown into, okay, how do you be like, so was your husband around to be like the parent and were you able to back off? Is that what you figured out? Or like, how did you figure, like, what did you figure out what works for you?
Well, I think it was working for our circumstance. And actually, while you're talking about that, it's really interesting is my daughter's experience with my husband was very different than my experience with my stepson. And I don't know if that's part of my ex-partner is not in the picture at all anymore. And so that is a different relationship because my husband is dad to her now. But my
Did she almost want that? Like, is that kind of the idea is that she wanted that because she didn't have it?
Yeah, she was 3, so she was very young. So So he is dad, and he actually ended up adopting her. So he is dad now.
And he probably doesn't even remember your former.
Very, very vaguely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the 6-year-old, I mean, you'd think that's still pretty young, but like you found that that was old enough to be more, and with mom in the picture, it was a different dynamic.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Tell us the difference.
I think a lot of it was, so there's actually something that's called the loyalty bind. I don't know if you've heard of this, but.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yes. So basically what it is when the child feels like they are being disloyal to their parent by accepting or loving a new adult in their life. And so there was this constant battle, I think, with him. I didn't understand, and I took it really personal. I was like, he hates my guts, and it was really personal.
And he just felt disloyal to his mom.
Yeah, and once I realized that, like, it literally took me years to get to this point, but I was like, oh, this isn't about me. This is about his feelings about his mom. And once I recognized that, it was like this huge burden lifted from me. Like, it's okay. He's like struggling with his own feelings. This is not personal. It's okay for me to let go of that offense, right? Like,
but it's not offensive.
It's not offensive.
He's in that bind.
Yeah.
He's in that situation where he's trying to navigate something hard.
Yeah.
For the first few years we were married, I tried to talk to the boys about that explicitly on a regular basis. Like, hey, I'm not trying to replace your dad. I know you love your dad and you should. And, now you just have two people that love you instead of just one. Like I tried to make it explicit that you're not being disloyal to me if you love your dad. And right. I don't feel that it should be the other way either. And of course, they were old enough to kind of get that. I mean, the younger one had more trouble adjusting overall, but he loves me now. I mean,
and I don't think they feel that disloyalty anymore.
No.
Yeah.
So how long have you been married?
We've been married for about 9 years.
9 years?
So,
okay.
wow.
So how long did it take before he kind of stopped feeling in a bind? Like, was it kind of when you released the need to like take it personally, or was it like over more period of time?
I actually don't know if there was like a visible switch there. And honestly, like, I don't know if it's completely gone. If like sometimes that still comes up occasionally.
You're not my mom kind of thing.
Yeah, there have been certain circumstances, like if she's doing really well, then things are good with me. But if something hard happens to her, like, it's kind of like projected onto me, almost like it's my fault.
Right.
I find really interesting. And so now it's like, oh, this is it. This is okay. This is just his way of trying to process. And that made all the difference for me in our relationship, to help me have like some empathy for where he was coming from. Because in a blended family, like, it's not built from a ideal circumstance, right? There's like a death or a divorce or some sort of separation that's bringing this family together.
Yes, you can appreciate the kids are in a complex situation.
Yes. Yeah. Everyone has had some kind of trauma.
Yeah.
That complexity can be kind of beautiful. And
yes.
I'll give you an example, and I'd love to hear your reaction to this. But my youngest son was in his early teens when his mom and I got divorced, and she got together with someone new pretty soon after that. And my son, his name's Henry, said, I'm not going to ever call him dad. And I told him, that's up to you. I won't take it personally if you feel you need to do that. It's okay. But that was his stance, and it remained his stance. He never really wavered from it. But I remember at one point he went through some issues, and we were doing a conference call with his mom and grandparents and trying to figure out how to deal with this situation that Henry was in. And I said very, not sternly, but very matter of factly, Henry, when you're at Chris's house, I don't want any of this. You're not my dad and you can't tell me what to do. If you're at his house, I want you to respect his rules. And I think in a way, Henry felt a little betrayed by that, but also I think he got it that, look, you're in this situation and you've got to obey the rules regardless of which house you're in.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't want to like cast a pall over this, but Henry was killed in August in a rock climbing accident. Well, his stepdad made a post on Facebook and about my son Henry. And he didn't say he was my stepson or anything like that. He just said my son. And I guess some parents might feel threatened by that or bothered by it.
Yeah.
I guess my thought is if he had a father and a stepfather that both thought of him as a son and loved him, then he was fortunate.
Right.
And you know, as I walked down off the podium after speaking at the funeral, the first person who came up and gave me a big hug was the stepdad. And so I think in a way, there was a recognition there that, look, we all loved him.
Right.
And it doesn't matter that he wasn't born to this guy.
And it didn't threaten your position.
It didn't threaten my position or where I knew I was in his heart, any of that.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's beautiful. Actually, I would just, I just think that that's amazing that step parents can really be this amazing influence. And as soon as we try to make it a competition, it just kills it and it makes it more complicated for the kids.
Yeah.
Which like, that's so heartbreaking that we feel like we're like doing this favor, like being possessive over our children, and it ends up hurting them and harming them more in the long run.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And when I was first divorced, I met with a woman at like just a singles activity who had just lost her husband to death. And she'd been a stepmom to his 4 kids. And she'd moved here to Utah from where she was because once he died, the mom said, you're not in their life anymore. Like she had no legal rights. Mm-hmm. But she said, I wish this mom would realize that love is additive, that me loving her children doesn't threaten her position as a mom, that me loving her children is just good for them. That's it. And that had a huge impact on me. And we wrote about it in our book, Intentional Courtship. And we just did a podcast that we released on Valentine's Day of this year. It's episode 107, Love is Additive. And love being additive is this principle that like I carried into like when my former spouse got remarried. And kind of like what I think what we've talked about so far is that parents can help parents love children with this philosophy. And instead of being a competition and hurting the kids, we really can show up and say, you know what, when you're at your other parent and your step parent's house, like honor their wishes, you know, especially if it's a good situation. If it's a good situation and they're really trying, you know, we can support the step parent. I know I've tried to do that, like with my own children, and encourage them to have a relationship with her and not feel threatened by, you know, that at all. That's the way I prefer it. I think that it's better for them for sure.
Right. And there are definitely circumstances that make it obviously harder to have warm feelings for new people entering a life. Like, right. Like if it was like an affair type of relationship, like that would be definitely harder.
Well, and that's not where love is additive, really. It
can be done though. I mean, I've seen it.
Yes. Yeah. That was the point. I worked with clients who have come to me and they're like, this is the situation, but I know that for the kid's best interest, I have got to have at least a respectful relationship with this person, even though what's going on inside of me is like,
It's not about me now.
That's its own thing. But my kids need to know that it's okay for them to have a relationship with this new person.
Yeah. Well, and it's not that, and I think in that situation, love is additive. It's the affair that wasn't, but the affair isn't part of the new situation anymore.
Right.
And anyway, I think I want to just point out to our listeners or viewers that if you're interested in this philosophy, I would recommend listening to Love is Additive, episode 100 on Lily Pod. Because it really did change like my whole perspective. And I think it really does contribute to parents helping parents parent rather than being competitive.
And I think I kind of took this off into the weeds when I started with it's complicated, it's complex, but complex can also be beautiful. Is that your experience? Is there so let us know your thoughts on that and how that worked out.
Silver lining in the complexity that you see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I all the time will tell people, if I were to go back 20 years and tell myself like this would be my life, I'd be like, are you kidding me? Like, what is going to happen? I'm going to be married for 8 years. I struggled with infertility in my first marriage. Actually, we didn't talk about this, but my daughter was adopted in my first marriage because I was not able to get pregnant. And so, like that is a beautiful thing all on its own. And I won't go on that tangent, but I didn't expect my life to take that turn. And then getting divorced, like that was its own whole thing to process. Not what I had anticipated. Nobody anticipates that they're going to have that going on in their life. And then getting married again to get this another child that's not, it's a different type of relationship for sure. Like it always will be. And I'm totally fine with that now. Like now that I've processed that and been okay with that, but how amazing the way that God works, that he, all of a sudden I have 2 kids where I didn't know if I'd ever have any kids. And I have 2 kids in my life. And since we actually had 2 more kids together. So I have 2 biological kids now as well. And it's just this beautiful mixture of like, when I look at my family, I just see God's hand all over it. That, yeah, I did get the family I wanted. It just like took some detours, like in this special path, but I would not go back and change it because of who I became through the process. I'm positive that the reason blending my family was so hard was because this is what I do now. Like, I get it. I get when people are struggling. I understand why it's hard. And if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be able to help other people. I wouldn't have empathy or understanding for other people's circumstances. Same thing with going through a divorce, right?
Yep, we feel the same way with our divorces because that's more like what we target is people who need support recovering.
Yeah.
And becoming the best version of themselves so that they can then go forward and create beautiful lives and beautiful blended families. And that's a perfect example, I think, of the complexity that really has become very beautiful to you. Yeah. Is that you've got a yours, mine, and ours. You've got the adoptive experience. You had the infertility experience. You had the I get a bonus kid experience. And even though it was hard, like you were excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah. God works in mysterious ways, and it's so beautiful. And what an amazing opportunity to have like all these kids come to me in different ways. And it doesn't detract from any of them. Like, it's just amazing and beautiful for every one of them.
And they're all special.
Yeah. It's funny. Cathy and I are 12 years apart in age. Sometimes I say, yeah, I wish we could have met when you were 18 and I was 30, we would have had more time together and all that. And yeah, theoretically, I understand that. But then she says, you wouldn't have liked me when I was 18.
Yeah.
And,
and I probably wouldn't have liked you when you were 30. We weren't the same people.
Yes. Yeah. We've had that exact same conversation, actually. I think that's really funny. Like 20 years ago, we wouldn't have been interested in each other, but now we have so much in common and we've changed into these people that sometimes like the petty things that I cared about when I was 18, like they don't matter at all now. It really comes down to like our values and like where are we going? That's what really matters.
I wanted to sort of tie this back to something you said earlier when you were talking about how you had different styles of discipline and all this. Well, when I married Cathy, I mean, I liked her kids. I mean, they were always welcoming to me when we were dating, and all of that. In fact, at our wedding, I gave each of them a wedding ring too.
Oh, that's cute.
But they weren't. They were raised a little different from my kids. My kids were, I don't know, the family they grew up in. I mean, I have to say, was probably a more male dominant home. So there was a lot more trash talking. There was a lot more, just humor. And Cathy's kids reminded me in the beginning a little bit of Ned Flanders' kids on The Simpsons, And my thought was, they're not like my kids. They don't look like them. They don't act like them. They're just raised a little bit different. And yet I took the position at that point that I was going to let her do the heavy lifting on the parenting for a while and ease more into things. And I was just going to try and love each kid for their own things. I mean, they both have relationships now with my sons, particularly the oldest that is still with us. He's 28 and your youngest is now 12, but they have a relationship. They're like, they're friends and they both love movies and they talk about movies and movie making and all kinds of stuff. And it's not what I would have guessed that I would have a 12-year-old that's like bonded to my 28-year-old, but
right.
But they found something they have in common and they go with that. For the benefit of our audience and myself, what do you mean by Ned Flanders in The Simpsons? I have no idea what he's talking about.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Please share. I didn't watch a lot of Simpsons, so.
Ned Flanders is Homer Simpson. I guess my kids were more like the Bart Simpson, but don't have a cow, man, and the neighbors were the Flanders. They were this born again Christian family, and these kids were almost too saccharine sweet to be real.
Oh.
They're playing a Christian board game. How come you always get to cleanse the leper? It's funny that
I never knew that's what you thought.
Well, it's funny because Cathy always thinks that her kids fight like cats and dogs, and I'm like, oh, you have no idea. I mean, my boys used to throw fists,
Right.
And I mean, they loved each other. They still love each other. My oldest gave the main talk at Henry's funeral. He feels that loss very acutely.
I think he also felt some regret for those fights.
Oh yeah. But I mean, they grew up together in a kind of free form way. They were allowed to run more like we were when we were kids.
I would say for sure that their dad and I were both very involved, and it's 50-50 custody, and we're both very hands-on parents. So they didn't run amok and do their own thing a lot. Like I think we're a lot more structured for sure.
Anyway, I've deferred to her when it came to those two, because I didn't want to come in with my own new set of ideas. I will say though, I mean, the youngest child, her youngest, he was a very serious kid when I first met him. And I think my sense of humor has rubbed off on him. I mean, now you'll hear him cracking jokes or, trash talking a little bit.
He's even been trying to door rumble you.
Yeah.
Jeff door rumbles my kids when they're in the bathroom. And so now he's like trying to get back at him.
So I mean, there's a little bit more of that influence now, but I think that is one of those things that we adjust to. Somebody else parented their kids very serious and protected them from ever feeling bad, and another one's like, nah, you got to learn how to deal with this kind of stuff. Deal with it, you know.
Right. I think it's really beneficial to see the benefit, like you're saying. We actually had a similar situation. Our kids are, the two oldest are like complete opposite in personality, like in every way. One's really high energy, one's really low energy, like one's super competitive, like it's the complete opposites. But over the years, the last 9 years, like they have learned from each other. The one has taught the other how to kind of come out of their shell a little bit more and be a little more social. The other has taught the one to be a little more compassionate and understanding, like see things from a different perspective. And I think it is the most beautiful thing I have sat back and witnessed, to watch how they have learned so much from each other. And like it was like this
almost by osmosis kind of thing.
And yeah, it's been amazing to watch that. And
I was actually wondering about that. And you're talking about the 3 and 6 year old, the kids from the formers.
When we first got married, yeah.
So I was wondering actually about that, because I know first and second children tend to be the opposite. So I was wondering if that was different, but it sounds like it's very similar in terms of opposite first and second child, even though they're blended.
Yeah. And we joke a lot in our family. We literally had 3 firstborn children in our family. Like, because the stepson, he was the firstborn. And then my daughter who was adopted, she was the firstborn child. And then my first biological daughter was also a firstborn. So we're like, we've got these 3 stubborn kids in our life.
Speaking of complexity, her youngest is the youngest in our family at this point, but he's got 2 under him in his dad's family. So he's a middle child over there.
Yeah,
that's quite.
I can imagine how complicated that must be for the kid.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like my stepson is an only child when he's with his mom, and then he comes to our house and he's the older brother to three sisters. Like that's a big life change every week.
I wonder actually if that's good for him. Like if he likes like the contrast of like, okay, I get to be special and alone and like take a breather, and I get to go have like fun with like all these people.
Yeah, I do. I think it's been really hard, but I think that there's definite benefits.
Mm-hmm.
That benefits both ways.
Yeah, I know there's been benefits for me. Like I chose to purposely and intentionally see my kids being 50% at their dad's, as I get to work on, earning an income and, progressing, in other areas of my life, and they come home and I'm a better parent. Like, I feel like I'm a better mom when they come back. And now I don't know what it's like to have kids all the time. Like,
right.
That's not something we have.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, been really interesting for me to watch, because I have my 3 girls, they're here all the time. So it's just my stepson that goes back and forth, but to see how intentional, I like you use that word, that we are parenting him, like we have to really step back and say, what is important? Like, what do we want to teach him? What do we want to do with our time here? And it's been really valuable to step back and say, what matters?
So I wanted to ask you, how did you and your husband figure out the different parenting styles and what kind of family culture you were going to create? How did you work that all out?
That is a great question. That was not easy. That was one of those things where, we were both divorced and like both thought we were right all the time because like our walls went up immediately, and pride was not our friend at the time. But as soon as like we started to break down some of that pride, like my way is the right way, no, you're stupid, like that kind of stuff. When we broke that down, we ended up kind of going like from extremes this way, and we really are on the same page now. It just took some time, like took me humility to be like, oh, I can see how that actually is helpful to like calm down about this one thing. Or, you know, how he's like, oh, I can see how it is important to like maybe say something about this circumstance. And it took time.
No, isn't it interesting that the dynamic between you having some different parenting styles and then learning from each other is similar to the dynamic you've seen in your kids that came together and they're opposites and they learn from each other too.
Yes, absolutely.
That's
absolutely.
really cool.
And, you know, I think that's why we have families. I think that's what God intended. I wasn't meant to be that person my whole life. That my marriage has challenged me in all the good ways. It's grown me into a better person, a more compassionate person, a more understanding person. Like, it's challenged me. It's been really hard, but I don't think it was meant to be easy.
You know, that made me think a little bit too. I think we have the same challenge going into a first marriage. It's not quite as complicated because we don't have kids yet. In most cases, when we go into a first marriage, but I mean, going into a first marriage, I mean, as I think about my own first marriage, my wife had come from a family where after dinner, everybody got up and helped clean up and take care of the dishes. And then they all went into the living room and sat down and put on a movie. And nobody talked from then until bedtime. They all just watched the movie every night. Now, she's laughing because if you know my family, the family I grew up in, it was not like that. We were talking, we were debating, we were talking politics, religion, you name it.
Actually, I was laughing because we turn on a movie and we can't stop talking and we keep pushing. We try to do both.
The funny thing is that the family culture that me and my former wife created kind of incorporated both. I mean, we had a ton of movies. You know, Cathy and I don't watch nearly as many movies as me and my former wife did, but we had a lot of movies and we watched them, but it was the same kind of thing she's talking about where, yeah, but we talked during the movie too.
Yeah, I think last night, I think around midnight, I had to say, I love talking to you. And we've been talking for a while and now I just need to like zone out. So now we have to balance.
Right. I think my former wife found my family kind of exhausting. You know, she wanted more of, let me be in my head. Don't challenge me. Don't debate with me. Don't talk incessantly to me. You know, let me sort of be in my own space. And, you know, I was much more rough and tumble like my family. I think she did find issues with that. But of course, when we got married, for example, I was used to the kind of culture me and my former wife had created in our home and family. And, you know, in a way, it was like moving to a foreign country to get married to Cathy.
You know, you say that, but it seems like you moved into it with such ease.
Well, I mean, I expected that was going to be an adjustment.
So you think the expectation made it easier to
I mean,
at least pretend you knew what you were like doing and felt comfortable?
Yeah. And over time, I felt like, you know, we were going to create our own culture that reflected our personalities. I think where we may get in trouble with step families, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is that we've both done it before. We've both parented before.
Yes.
We think that the way we've figured out is the way.
Yes.
And instead of just sort of looking at it like a newly married first marriage couple who thinks, okay, we're figuring this out as we go.
Right. Yeah. I think that's honestly one of the biggest challenges in a step family is exactly what you said. I was already a mom. He was already a dad. I was doing it the way I wanted, especially after I got divorced. Like, I'm the only one doing it at this point. I'm full-time mom and my way is right. That's why I'm doing it my way. Right.
Right.
And so, yeah, there's definite need to adjust expectations when you're going into that new stage. Now, like, some people are like, well, is that even worth it? is it even worth like trying to parent with somebody else? I hear that a lot from people. And for me personally, yeah, it was really hard. It was really, really difficult at the beginning, but I would not trade it. And it has become the most beautiful. Nobody could have told me like how much I would just love my family after a few years. It was hard for a while, but like I like to compare it to childbirth. Like you go into it, you're so excited, you're gonna have this baby, there's a lot of hope there. And then labor starts, right? And what is like so scary, there's like intense pain. It's like, what did I do? Why am I doing this? I made a mistake. Please take it back. I don't want to do this anymore. And then you get to the other side of that where you have this new baby and this flood of love and joy, and it changes your life. Like you have to adjust your expectations. You probably had all these hopes for your child and it might not be the way you anticipated. So you adjust that, but it becomes the most beautiful thing. You wouldn't trade for the world. Yeah. And I think blended family is exactly the same. Like it will be hard. Yeah. But there's another side. There's like the other side of that. And a lot of blended families quit in the middle. When it gets hard, that's when they bail. And it's like getting to that other side.
I love that analogy, and it goes perfectly with what we were discussing this morning. And Jeff mentioned that like anybody who's ever talked about life or like a life death experience, like a death experience to come back to life, they always talk about a tunnel, like a tunnel with a light at the end of it. I mean, have you ever heard those before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were thinking, well, maybe when we die, I mean, that's like what it's like being birthed into a new experience. And so we compared it to birth. And so I think now like this new step is when you get married and blend a family, it's like birthing a new, like totally new entity.
Yes. Yes.
And then there's this light at the end of the tunnel, but the tunnel is narrow and it's painful and it's dark until you get to the light.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think, in a lot of ways, you've talked about kind of how you see this cross-pollination influence with your kids, and they're kind of each a different animal in the zoo in a way.
Yeah.
And I think Cathy's kids are more interesting because they've lived with me than they would have been if it was just single parenting. But that we'll never know that for sure. But I also believe like when we always say Cathy is the anchor and I'm the sail. And so her tendency in parenting is let's make sure that the kids are doing what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it and not complaining too much about it. And I'm a little more freeform. Let's, inject some influence now and then and see how this turns out.
Yeah, like let's see how they're doing and let's invite over their friends and how about you?
Oh, and I did that deliberately with my kids' friends. Some of them call me dad now. But some of, I wanted to know who my kids were hanging out with. I wanted them to like me to the extent possible. And those kids actually helped reinforce a lot of things for me because, one of my kids would be at school talking to their friend bagging on me, and they would say, hey, your dad's actually a great guy. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I get peer support.
Yeah. I love that.
I got kind of lucky that someone had already raised teenagers, so he prepared me for all of that.
Yeah. That a great benefit.
Yeah.
I was going to say that there are times when she's tearing her hair out because of what one of the boys is doing. And I've already raised 2 boys. My favorite saying about that is this stew takes a long time to cook. Don't get too hung up on what's going on right now in this moment. This is going to take a long time to work itself out. And sometimes I can sit and talk calmly to one of the teenagers where she's wanting to lay down the law. And I don't say that there's never a time to lay down the law either. Sometimes you got to do that. Right. But I think we balance each other a little bit that way. And if we can both appreciate what the other one brings, then we've got more to offer. That's how I feel.
Absolutely. I that is why we have marriages, I believe.
Mm-hmm. So I have a few questions for you. One, and you can share as much or as little as you want about this, because I know it can be personal, but you said you had some infertility, and there may be someone listening who might be curious about, like, well, how did that get resolved for you? Like, because some of us might still be trying to resolve those concerns.
Yeah. Oh, how did they get resolved? Well, it really just, I feel like it like is almost a different life because it seems like a really long time ago. So I gotta like go back there. But it really came to trusting that God had my best intentions in mind. Like everything he does in my life is beautiful and good, even if I don't see it in the moment. And like looking back, if I had planned my life, I would have had like 4 kids in my first marriage, right? And like, how would have that turned out? It would have been a lot harder to be a single
How long
mom.
were you married the first time?
I was married for 8 years in my first
So
marriage.
you totally could have had popped out 4 kids, but you didn't.
Totally. Yeah,
You
totally.
adopted one.
I would have wanted, that's what I wanted actually.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, but I was able to go through this process, the adoption process, which is not easy by any means. I don't know if it's harder to give birth to a child or to go through the adoption process. Like people are like, oh, that's the easy way to adopt. And like, no, absolutely not. That's not the easy way. But to be okay and trust that God, his hand was in it, and that he understood my desires and the pain that I felt and when I wasn't able to have children. But that was something when I got divorced, that was in the back of my mind, like maybe I'm going to be able to have my own biological kids now. Like maybe that's going to be a thing for me.
Oh.
And that just sort of worked.
We started trying probably like a year after we got married in our in my second marriage, and like there were still some fertility things, still had to go on some medication and things, but it happened pretty fast.
Well, and isn't that interesting, like how open you still were to it after 8 years of trying and not having that blessing the way you thought it would come.
Mm-hmm.
But then still getting your 4 kids all in different ways.
Yeah.
Did you worry about how, especially with the first one of the younger kids, did you worry about how a new member of the family was going to change who you were?
I didn't worry about how it changed me so much, but I was worried about
who you are as a family
dynamic. Yeah, our family dynamic. Both the kids were very nervous about that. Like, we've already gone through lots of big changes, and now here's another big one. Like, how are they going to feel about us? This is the cutest story, but my stepson was very hesitant to love a new person, and he came to the hospital, and we're like, oh, do you want to hold her? And he was like, no. And she had to be put under a light. She had jaundice for a minute in the hospital, and he would go look at her, but he wouldn't touch her. And finally someone's like, okay, well, it's time to go, and just panic went over his eyes, and he's like, I have to hold her. Please, I need to hold her. And like in that moment you could just see the love that he had for this little baby, and it changed his heart. Like you could just visibly see his heart soften. And I didn't doubt anymore. I know that this is going to be a beautiful thing for our family. That it was a little bit nerve-wracking for him. The unexpected is scary, but it changed everyone for the better.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's such an inspirational story for anyone who might be considering it and they're nervous and they're not quite sure.
Yeah,
that's really beautiful. And I think most kids probably would have their hearts softened or changed in that situation where they're just introduced to this new little person, and at some point they're like, all right, yeah, I can't help it. I can't help it.
I love you. I
them.
can't help it.
Yeah. Well, that's actually leads me to my next, maybe it's not a question so much as an observation in this conversation, that you seem to love all your kids the same. Like, maybe different in terms of like they're different people, but like same in terms of like you treat them the same. You treat them as your family.
Would I jump in front of a car for any of them? Yes. Like, right. Like, absolutely. I would do that.
Including the stepson.
Yes. Yes.
And you don't feel like, and they don't like, do you think that they know that they are all the same in your eyes and in your family dynamic as anyone else? Like,
that's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know, as kids, we like interpret the world in different ways. So I don't know exactly how they see it, but I hope that they do. My relationship with my stepson is different. It is not like a parent-child relationship, like the typical, but it is like, I do have really strong feelings for him. I love him. It's, I don't know how to, I was not there like when he was a baby, so I missed a lot of that bonding stage, but absolutely like have so many great memories and things that we've built now.
Well, then he's gone half the time, so that also complicates it.
Yeah.
Then that's different than what the other kids have as far as the dynamic goes.
Right. And I'm not his mom. And so I get that. Like, I don't expect him to love me like his mother, but he can love me different. And that, like, and you know, that's okay. We can have different types of love for people. Like, I love him. Like, I used to be a school teacher, and I love
Does he call you Brittney?
Yeah, he calls me by my first name.
And then the rest call you mom.
Okay,
so then there's that difference also. I guess maybe let's talk about a specific example. Like, if you were planning a birthday party for him, would it be a similar budget and a similar idea to what you would plan for other kids?
Oh yeah. Okay, for sure.
And if you were like taking them all school shopping, same thing?
Yeah, that gets complicated because I allow his mom to do that for him, because that's their thing. Like, right, she throws a birthday party for him every year. We did do one for him one year, but I didn't want to like step on toes. That's more
out of respect for his mom and what his wishes, rather than like, I'm making you different in my eyes because you're a step.
Yes.
It's not the Cinderella thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there are all those old fairy tales about wicked stepmothers for a reason.
Well, and I know that still happens. And I think that's why I'm wanting to point out that even though the dynamic is complex and there's some differences, because there needs to be differences in that dynamic, you try, and it's actually great. Your answer is great. You can't speak for your children and what they feel, but you do try to create a collaborative, like, inclusive kind of environment in your home. Like, that's the observation I'm making through the conversation, is that it seems like you think they're all awesome and they're all your kids and they all came to you in special ways. And you're being the mom that they need you to be, even if it's not like all the same mom to each.
Right. And so that's the complicated thing, is that it is not equal. It can't be equal. Like, everything can't be fair, I guess. But I do my best to give each one what they need from me, which is different. Each one is different.
Which then creates an environment of inclusiveness, I think. Like, kind of like, I love you in the way you need to be loved, and I do that for all of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to get your thoughts on another kind of related subject, because I mentioned, I think, that I knew Cathy's kids for a couple of years before we got married. I liked them. I mean, I could even probably say I loved them in some ways.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I think of them as my kids. You know, I mean, obviously, I know the reality that they have another father, and that he is very important to them. But I remember thinking when we got married, you know, that they weren't like my kids. They didn't look like them. They didn't act like them. you know, they were raised in a different family culture up to this point. And I remember the thought coming to me, give it time.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times we want everything to be how it's going to be, and we want to arrange things the way they're supposed to be, and you know, we want it all to happen right now. And I think, you know, for me, it's been more of an evolution.
Yeah.
And those feelings have come with time as I tried to do the things to build those relationships. Like I take her kids out on separate outings now and then, you know, just to have individual time with them, get to know them, hear their hopes and dreams and worries and all that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
But it wasn't automatic or immediate. And just because it isn't doesn't mean it's not going to be great.
Exactly.
So let's hear your thoughts on all of that.
Well, I think that's a big mistake that a lot of people make. Is like, I'm ready to just love this child as my own, but like, what about the kid? Like, are they ready for that? Like, you can't force someone to have a relationship with you, and that takes time. Especially, you know, when we have a baby, you have those like prime bonding moments with them. And when you come into someone's life a little bit later, they might be a little bit hesitant, especially depending on like where they came from, what past traumas they might have had, and allowing people to be in their life, right? If parents got divorced, they might be a little bit nervous about letting somebody else in. And so you can't force it, but you can do your best to love them and show them that, but they might not be ready the same time you're ready.
Right. Well, and I'd actually like to go back to our episode 95 on LilyPod is Love Beyond Fear with Kelly and Boyd Curtis. And they talk about blending their family crock-pot style. Mm-hmm. And crock-pot style, I think, goes back to Jeff saying that the stew takes a long time to cook.
Yep.
And so if we're crock-potting a blended family, it's like this slow cooker response to, okay, I really want to have a relationship with you. Where are you at? Let's honor like both people in the situation, and then just let it grow slowly, like as a crock pot would.
Yep. I love that analogy.
Let it grow without too many expectations. And
yes, lower the expectations for sure.
Like you, I have not insisted that the boys call me dad. They'll do it once in a while by mistake.
Yeah.
You know, and that's okay. I feel good about that. But I've told them, you can call me any respectful thing you want. You can call me Jeff. You can call me dad. You can call me Your Royal Highness. I mean, whatever you want to call me is fine if it's respectful.
Respectful, yeah.
And you know, I don't push that. I know where I am in their hearts, regardless of what title they give me.
Yeah.
And Jeff has been known like since the beginning to say, does my son look like me, to like every random stranger? And like he said, he knows
pale
they
and
don't.
redheaded and they don't look anything like me, but
he just likes to get a feel for how people respond. And every once in a while they'll be like, yeah,
a little bit,
or like, no, not really.
I love that you said that. Actually, we do that a lot in our family. Like, oh, well, she got that from dad. Like my daughter who's adopted, we always joke that she
double adopted, really, like to you and then him.
Yeah, she was. We joke that she got all sorts of traits from him. Oh, you got that from dad, or like my stepson, oh, you got this from me. And like we joke about it with all the kids. We don't exclude that they're biological or not. We all are inheriting traits from each other, and I love it. I think it's hilarious.
Sometimes families do start to look alike, like couples do, and that's so cute. Like, I always think that's so cute. And maybe that is like the whole crock-pot style, you know, letting the stew take a long time to blend and meld. And like you've said, influence each other and teach each other by who we show up as in life, like how we're showing up, who we are, how and then in families, then we like learn from the people who come to us that way. And I guess I'd like to just finish up in this conversation with maybe like, what have you seen in your coaching practice that you think would be most helpful? I mean, obviously don't divulge any personal information of a client. I know you wouldn't do that, but like, I guess more of overall, like, what do you think would be most helpful to anyone to understand that you've seen that kind of everyone needs to know in terms of remarriage and blending families?
And throw in anything you've been hoping to get out or wanting to talk about that we haven't yet.
Okay. One of the biggest things when my clients come to me is we talk about when you're going to build a family, there's three main parts you need. So it's like building a house. The foundation is ourself. We have to be okay ourself. If I'm not taking care of my own needs, I have nothing else to give to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that is critical, and that's something you can work on before you're in a blended family. Like,
that's a huge part of what we do well,
yeah,
to help people recover from divorce and get ready to be very intentional about building a relationship, a new healthy relationship, as they have to be, like you said, good with themselves. We totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that your stepson can feel kind of disrupted toward you when his mom's not doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very natural for a kid to want to take care of their parent and to even subjugate their own happiness when their parent's not happy. So I think that's
it's important for kids too.
Point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So you're talking about a personal foundation, like inside yourself. Okay.
Be okay with you. Be okay. Like
step one.
And all the things.
Okay.
Step two is like, you're going to build the walls, and that's going to be the relationship with your partner. And if you really want this to be a strong family unit, that partnership has got to be solid. And going into a blended family, that relationship is the newest relationship in the whole family, like you and your spouse. So it needs a lot of nurturing, especially at the beginning, right? If those walls crumble, the whole family unit will crumble. And then when you're good and your partnership is good, those walls are strong, that's when you build the roof, and it's just this beautiful home, this beautiful new family. If you're trying to like skip steps, you're not working on your relationship, and like all your attention goes to the kids, it's not going to last. It's going to crumble. So, I like to talk about those priorities, like strengthen your relationship. And by doing those things, you're giving the kids the very best opportunity that they will have.
Yes.
The healthiest.
I love that. And it really does pair well with our philosophy based on the two greatest commandments: to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that means that they are all unanimous, they're all harmonious, but the priority order is like God strengthens us, and then we strengthen ourselves, and then we strengthen the most close relationship to us, which is our partner who shares a bed with us. Yeah. And then we can then nurture our children and, the world at large, on out from there. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a similar idea that it sounds like that's kind of what you do in your coaching practice, is that you build those three steps and you make sure they're all there.
Yep.
And that they're in that order. How do you keep it in that order when it's Insta-family?
That's hard. Honestly, so when my clients first come to me, we'll do a lot of focus on we have to strengthen ourselves first. Okay. So that's where we start. And then
and that's just always true in life, no matter what situation you're in.
Yeah.
I think the bigger one is, how do you keep, I think I know the answer to this question, but how do you keep that relationship nurtured and important while you already have the kids?
Yeah, it's a really tricky balance. But I truly believe that if we're taking care of ourselves, our kids will benefit from that. If I am healthy, then they're getting the best. But if I'm not okay, they're not getting great things from me. Like if I'm hungry, I'm grumpy, right?
Oh yeah.
I'm a hangry mom and nobody likes that. But if I feed myself, everyone benefits from that.
Oh my gosh, I so concur. I've always
You know-
told Jeff, like, you want a happy wife, just keep me fed. I mean,
So,
although I have to be responsible for feeding myself, so it's a joke, but like, I mean, the idea is the same.
right. If I feed myself, then I can happily feed you also. Like I have this vision in my mind. I have a cup, and someone's pouring water into the cup, and then below the cup is a bowl. And as my cup is full of water, it's spilling over into the bowl, and that bowl is getting filled with water. And then as that bowl gets full, it spills over into a bigger bowl underneath that. And everyone is filled if you fill it in the right order, right?
Oh my gosh, I love that visual, because I've been thinking lately, and I've even been, so I have a coaching group of women called the Lily Ladies, and we've talked a lot about filling your cup and keeping it full and giving from a full well. And that's the same idea, that you're keeping your cup full and then it spills over.
Yes.
And that really is the better way. But I think as women, we tend to deplete ourselves, and then we're out of energy, and then we hate that we can't show up for people. And we have to go back to that, like, okay, no, this is like not the right order of things, because then I can't like let it spill over all this spilling.
Well, it's not just women. I feel that way too.
Yeah.
I mean,
so it's probably all people.
if I'm
if I only
stressed
have
out
a
with
couple
work
of
stuff or
drops,
whatever it is, you know.
if I only have a couple drops in my cup, I have nothing to share with anyone.
Maybe you can introduce that concept in Knights of the Lily.
Could be.
That's his men's coaching group. And yeah, I mean, I think we could all use more of that.
I want to just ask you about something related to, you talked about strengthening the partnership. And it reminded me that, you know, recently Cathy and I had a little disagreement in the car, and the boys were there, and the youngest, who is my stepson, came to us later. We're in our bedroom laying on the bed talking, and he comes and says, "You guys aren't going to get divorced, are you?" And, you know, I mean, he's been through that.
We don't argue very much, and yeah, not normally in front of them, and not normally at all. So,
but he's been through
unusual.
through divorce before. So anytime he sees something, that's going to be a little bit of a trigger for him.
Yeah.
And I said to him, "No, Forrest, I mean, I shouldn't have said his name, huh?" Anyway, I said to him, "We love each other. We're committed to loving each other. We're committed to, if we have a disagreement, we work it out, we figure it out. And we're not going anywhere, you know." And it's funny because
we hadn't quite worked it out. And when I heard that, even though like I knew that, it was reassuring to hear it.
Right. Yeah.
And I think especially in kids in a blended family, you know, we think, well, we can understand why kids in a nuclear first marriage family, their security is in their parents' relationship, and you've got to keep that strong. But in a blended family, that's somehow different. Well, it's different, but it's not different. I mean, he's very invested in us being a couple. You know, it would really rock his world if we weren't.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, he comes and asks that because that matters to him. And I think that's really, in a way, what we're shooting for is, yeah, we want them to be invested in our relationship with each other. So can you speak to that?
I think that's huge. That if, honestly, like in helping the kids have respect for the adults in the family, that the adults have to be respecting each other. Otherwise, like, your kid's going to take sides with you, my kid's going to take sides with me, and it's like this, I don't know, competition.
That movie, Yours, Mine, and Ours.
Yeah.
It's like about blending families.
It's not great if they feel like there's any kind of tension. Your kids are immediately going to take your side. And so really to give them that security that you're talking about.
I don't know. I think sometimes mine take his side.
That is true. That's funny. My kids do too.
Well, they feel like they have to take sides. The fact that they need to is a trigger for them, and it's not good for any of us.
Yeah, if you're trying to create a new family unit together, that's not the ideal circumstance if they're feeling like they have to choose one of the parents.
So it goes back to like your cup, you know, going into the cup and then funneling in, or then spilling out into the bowl. And then if there's enough left over, then into a bigger bowl. I really love that, and how it like really is like a visual for everything that we've already been teaching. Like, I mean, our very first podcasts on Lily Pod were all about that, about like cultivating love for God, self, and others, and, you know, having that priority order, and that God is love and so are we. And so when we're filled with his love and we don't have things distracting us like our hunger or whatnot, then we can really freely give it and still have it. And I think that's a really beautiful way to wrap this up. And how do people get a hold of you if they want to like join your blended families group, or like anything that you
or have your
offer?
coaching help or whatever?
Yeah, what is that?
Whatever they would like.
So I have a website. It's just called blendingbravely.com. I'm also on TikTok, Instagram. Like I'm around, but my website will be there. Blending Bravely.
Okay. And then I know you have a new Facebook group also for single mom, or not single moms, stepmoms, or
yeah, it's specifically for LDS stepmoms, which has not been my most of the clients I'm working with. I would love to start working with more LDS families in my coaching, and so I did create that Facebook group. It's called LDS Blended Family Moms, I think. It's brand new, but yeah, and I have some people in that group who are not married, so you know, anyone that's LDS, welcome, even if you're not LDS, as long as you're good with us talking about our beliefs. So
yeah, so that's great. And yeah, we work with a lot of Latter-day Saints. I mean, we welcome anyone who has other faiths. That's fine too, because a lot of the coaching principles are the same.
Yeah.
And we also have that background. So for anyone who is Latter-day Saint, and then, you know, we understand those that philosophy and that faith base. So that's awesome that you want to have more of those clients, and, you know, maybe we can collaborate and refer people to each other, you know, because we're more in those beginning stages, maybe even into like the premarital realm. And then you go and like swoop in and help with the blending families part, which is great. I think they need that.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Oh, there's definitely need for both areas for sure. No doubt.
We definitely appreciate your insight, your experience, and what you have brought to this discussion. It shows that you have been thinking about this and dealing with it for a long time, and that's very valuable. And we want to tell our guests, remember, anytime, especially in a blended family, is a great time for more additive love in your life. Thank you for listening and watching.